This is our January 17th City Council special session with our department heads. Step one for us as a council for budget. Step many for you guys out there in the audience, though. So, Tracy, could you do roll call, please?
Bermal.
Here.
Harrington.
Here.
Siddick.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Wason.
Here. Thank you. Item 3 is approval of the agenda, and you have this as you wanted it, Ryan?
Yes.
Okay. There are no changes. It is just this. So, motion for approval of the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Item 4. I'm going to just turn this right over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first, we have all of our management team in the audience tonight, except for our recreation director, Shelley Simpson, who is somewhere warm this evening and for the week. But standing in her place is our assistant recreation director, Brian Motley. You'll notice, well, you might have noticed, we changed things up just a tad bit from last year on the agenda for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to go over the general fund revenues first, as I've talked about that a little bit or tried to outline some of that in the memo. And secondly, in addition to being our assistant recreation director, Brian is also the assistant basketball coach for Liberty Boys basketball, and they have a game this evening. And so after culture and recreation sections done, Brian will scoot out of here. Everyone else, though, will happily stay and visit with us. So from a revenues standpoint, I tried to make some points in my memo just in terms of taxable valuation versus 100% values and the direction we're seeing the state legislature take property taxes in the state of Iowa. And we don't know anything more today than we did when they ended the session last year. But based on some of the rhetoric and comments we're hearing, we do remain concerned on what will happen to the property tax system moving forward. As I noted in the memo, we're still feeling the effects from the 2014 legislative change through the backfill reduction, but also through the most recent business property tax credit, which I'm not going to go through what I put in here, but it's convoluted at best. A piece of good news that we found out this afternoon, actually, is that while we lost valuation through that business property tax credit change, the state will be reimbursing the cities, at least in this fiscal year, and hopefully future fiscal years, for some of that loss. And we've totaled that based on a calculator that we received just late Friday to equal about $150,000, just over $150,000 in the general fund. So that's positive news that we're learning just today. And as I mentioned, it's not just North Liberty that's learning us. This was a calculator sent out to all the cities across Iowa. And it's interesting just to hear from the Department of Management on that. They were surprised at the commercial value that was lost through this law change, and actually had a hard time putting this calculator together because of all the variables. In fact, they say that this is their best guess at this point, and so that's what we're projecting that revenue on. So I wanted to point that out. As a result, we would be able to eliminate in here what was a potential property tax increase of about 13 cents. And then I wanted to just highlight some of the other revenues where we're seeing significant changes. You'll see in licenses and permits, we've jumped that up about $150,000. And here we're just seeing increased permit fees. That number has had its ups and downs over the years, and we feel pretty good about the number we have in there for 24. We're seeing the SAFER grant included in intergovernmental. This is, we actually, I think, have 2 SAFER grants running right now, but the big one is for the 3 new firefighters that will be coming on here in the next month or so. And then I wanted to point out the reduction in backfill from the state. You can see last year we budgeted at 244. This year we're budgeting it at 185, and then it goes down from there until it zeroes out in FY27. I would note again, this is a bit confusing. This is separate from the credit the $150,000 credit I just talked about. So there's technically two backfills happening from the state right now. One that'll zero out in 27, and the other one that doesn't have an end date, but could easily, as we saw with the one we're dealing with now, could easily be ended in the near future. So that's revenues, general fund revenues in a nutshell. The last comment I'll make is that our taxable value went up about $64 million from FY23, which again is equivalent to about 6%. So decent growth. Obviously, still putting a budget together does provide some challenges. So I think with that, I just ask if there's any questions on the revenue side of things. Okay, if not, let's jump to, it's going to be page 13 of the PDF, Culture and Recreation. And how I've done this previously is I'll go through all of Culture and Recreation, which includes various departments, and then at the end of that, the council will have an opportunity to ask questions about these specific budgets. If I've missed something, I know the department heads will jump in and call me on it. So the first one in Culture and Recreation is the library budget. A couple notes I'd make here is that we're proposing to take an adult services librarian from part-time, it's actually 3/4 time, to full-time. This position would not only assist with library-specific duties, but would also help with some of the things previously mentioned, like the summer lunch program, senior dining, and this coincidentally, this employee also has is exploring the opportunity of getting a degree in social work, which I know it's something Jenny has been eyeing for several years now. Another note I'd make in here, this goes to our part of some of the work our IT coordinator is doing, and that's setting aside money annually for routine computer upgrades. And you'll see that note in just about every department here. Parks, Building, and Grounds, here again adding a new full-time laborer. This would be a mid-year start as well. As we continue to add landscaped areas, and we have a lot of very beautiful areas that we've recently added. The most recent one would be Rancho Way Phase 5, where we're adding things into the median and at the intersections and around the pedestrian tunnel. But those things add up, and as a result, we need to continue to look at staffing our Parks Department if we want to continue to keep those things looking good while also managing all of the other parks, the ball fields, and also just general grounds and maintenance across the city. You might recall that Guy's department is kind of the jack of all trades, and so when something is an issue in a building, generally they'll get the call. From an equipment standpoint, we're looking at replacing an F-450 truck, a zero-turn mower, and a utility vehicle or a gator of sorts. The note I'll make on the truck, and this is what we've seen in all the departments that are looking at vehicles or specialized equipment anyway, is the lead time on those are crazy. And I think Guy can speak to this, but we got our name on a list for a truck in December that we needed to get on the list right away. No money had to be put down, but we had to put our name on the list. And I think, was that a year out or better than a year?
Year out.
So it wouldn't, even if we, even by doing that and then ordering it in July, it'd still be December before it got here. If we wouldn't have put our name on the list, it'd have been even further out. So those are the types of challenges that it's not just in the Parks Department, but I know Michael in the Streets Department has similar issues. The community center budget, this area is really dedicated to maintenance and upkeep of the facility. The $257,000 budget is for maintenance contracts for all the equipment in there, HVAC type of equipment. And as you might suspect, with an aging building, it continues to increase. One of the points I want to make here is we didn't include anything in the transfer line item for larger maintenance projects, and we have a list of them. In fact, you might recall we asked Shive Hattery to help us with a facility report, and we'll talk a little bit more about this at our next meeting. But we need to look for ways to help fund those projects. It's not new. It's probably not even. They're not exciting projects. They're just projects that are going to keep the facility open and operating. No changes in the cemetery budget. Again, we work with the township here and share costs with them in the maintenance and mowing of that area. And then lastly, nothing significant in the aquatic center budget either. We'll talk a little bit next week about a potential small project, capital project there, but otherwise fairly status quo in that budget category. So that is culture and recreation. And now, if there are questions, or if you have talked to a specific department about something, we can do that.
You guys have the questions on here for these folks while they're here? Yeah, Brian.
Any in all?
sorry?
Anybody in general, or
On the culture and recreation.
so?
Yeah.
Just for Guy. So we're repeating, or we're just rotating those mowers out still, like you've been doing, to keep like them all fresh and have a little bit of resale value, so they're not going down. So, and then the park staff person, didn't we tell you we couldn't get you one last year?
What's that? Say
It was the parks person, that was somebody you asked for last year too.
Yes.
Yep, and we-
Actually, we had kept one person on and made them full-time, but this is actually in addition.
Yep.
Yep.
And on that note, I would say one of the things that Guy looked at, and I'll jump in if
Yeah,
you
sure.
want to correct.
You're talking
me.
about landscaping?
Yeah. You
All right.
want to just take it? Go ahead.
Yeah. Just for my information, I was just curious. So all the new phase of highway or of Rancho Way, all the new landscaping that just went in. So I thought that'd be a great example to go out for a bid. What would it take for an annual basis to maintain all that landscaping? Turnkey, basically. So I have a base bid of a little over $40,000 just to take care of that section. That's just a one-time watering. So if you add in, let's say 8 to 10 waterings, it takes it up to about $60,000 annually just to take care of that section of landscaping alone. So I thought that would be a good example to show what was added on to our department just in that phase alone.
So that's $80,000 a year just to water that, and then in the winter, so we would spend that on an employee, but you wouldn't have anybody in the winter then
Correct.
to do it. So we'd actually, this is more of a value for us.
Yes. Yeah.
So, Guy, are you looking at just general laborer and baseline parks employee, or are you looking for someone from a specific background that comes in with some certs?
I am looking for something a little more focused, and that would be more towards the landscaping side of it. More of a not an entry level, but more of a mid-level person.
Any other questions? All right. Guy, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for culture and recreation?
I got another one.
Yeah,
So
go ahead, Brian.
The before and after school vans, are we using them much other than just for that, or?
We do use them quite a bit, and I don't know,
I know you
Brian,
use
if you're
them.
prepared to speak on this, but not just for before and after school. I know we use them during the summer for field trips, for the Rexters program. And so all 4 of those vans can be used at once, especially during.
So we're getting some extra use out of them.
Yeah, I would, and then I don't know if, go ahead, Brian, if you want to speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so we use them for the BASP program, and then we also use them in the summer for the summer camp program. In the summer, we use all 4 to take them to such places as the mall or places like that. We can't take it a lot to Adventureland and stuff like that because we can't go on the interstates. So when we do take them to Des Moines, we have to go off route and can't go on the interstates. So that's a little difficult. So we have talked about like a small bus type like Frog Hollow has or something like that, but those are $90,000 to $100,000 for one of those. So the route we've kind of gone is the vans, but it's tough to get anything other than kids in and out of the vans, adults or whatever. I mean, even watching kids get in and out with their backpacks and stuff, there isn't a lot of room. So it's something we've been kicking around and trying to figure out the best way and, what we could use to go on trips with seniors or something like that. Because we've taken seniors in the vans and it doesn't really work out so well. So
Yep. And you're just rotating these through to keep them all
Yeah.
safe
Yep.
and up speed and,
Yep.
and not
Yeah.
too worn out. So
Yeah.
cool.
Yep.
Thanks.
Anything else on there, Brian? No. Okay.
Yeah, well, we'll move on to public safety. So, Brian, we're good. Thank you.
Good luck.
Go Bolts.
Good luck.
Okay, so with the police department, you'll see a note here. We talked about revised holiday pay schedule for sergeants. So through our union negotiation, we agreed to accumulate their holiday pay differently, and as such, there'd be a payout if it's not used. And so we're accounting for that. This budget includes 25 certified officers, which is what we are certified positions. That includes the chief, and that's what we have today. And then, of course, two civilians in our front office. You'll note here that we're looking to replace 3 vehicles, 2 admin vehicles, and the lieutenant's truck. And as I understand it, and Diane can elaborate here, but I believe we're reusing some of the interior equipment, computers, et cetera, from the existing vehicles. Moving on to emergency management, there's not a note there, but I would note that we bumped that up a little bit just from a siren maintenance standpoint, seeing those expenses just trickle up. Fire department, a couple things going on here. We've included the three new full-time firefighters in here, and of course there's a related revenue with the SAFER grant to cover those expenses this year. I think someone had a question about how are we going to move forward in the future, and we anticipate to, while we have 3 years at 100% revenue, budget less revenue in the subsequent 2 years, so that it doesn't all come to us as one big hit when we bring on, or when we are no longer receiving those grant funds. There are a few items in the capital outlay line items that will be transferred to our fire capital fund. Partial funding for a command EMS vehicle in the general fund, and I'll talk about that here, where the other funding is going to come from in just a second. New hire PPE, and then replacing gear, and this is the chief has been on a rotation of replacing our gear, and so we're just continuing to do that. And then if you just for a second flip the page, you can see the fire capital fund. And what I'm showing for that command vehicle is that we use a little bit of the balance in this fund to help make that purchase. And we're estimating about $80,000 for that vehicle. And then you'll notice that the fund itself is flush and has over $250,000 in it. However, or over $266,000, 250 of that is set aside or reserved for the future land purchase. Anything that's not used with the land purchase will stay in this fund and then be used for additional fire capital down the road. Building inspection department, again, the big change there is an upgrade, not using the same software, but it's time for an upgrade of that product. We actually started with, it's called iWork. We were one of the first cities to start using this. Not just the building department. I know Russ uses it for some code enforcement things. So we're pretty satisfied with the software. It's just time for an upgrade. Animal control remains steady. And then, again, not a whole lot of change in traffic safety, but this is where we pay crossing guards from. Questions on public safety?
I just had a question about the fire expenses. And it's kind of embarrassing, I suppose, to ask this question, but could you work this through, Chief? The personnel services costs don't seem to go up terrifically so, but we're adding 3 new hires, and I know it's being offset by revenue, so maybe it's not all being illustrated right here. Is that what it is? You're just not putting them on there?
I'm not exactly sure of the black magic that happens.
I can take that one.
Awesome.
On the wages.
Thanks for calling it black magic. It means I have somebody that may not sees what I'm talking about.
I can take it, and Tracy can correct me, but this is the first year in our system that we've used the software to auto-generate our personnel costs based on how we're entering the position into the system. And so in previous years, we would do this manually through a spreadsheet. Now the system generates it. And so when we put all those factors in and double check them, of course, these are the figures that come up with. So we could argue that last year's number might have been a bit high for what we actually were planning to spend.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So you'll notice actually on all these personnel services that some might have went up a little more than what we anticipated. A fair amount of them didn't go up as much because we now are using real-time calculation in the New World software.
Okay. So looking at the FY22 actual numbers versus maybe the FY24 budget would help us to really see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now we've added a position, I believe, since I think, well, no.
So the SAFER grant was a total of what, 1.05 million?
Yeah,
for the 3?
just over. Yep.
Okay. So then the number we're talking about budgeting in for this year is a third of that amount, correct?
Well,
Or no?
yeah.
Yeah.
Expenditures, yes.
Yes. Okay. So that's where I was hung up as well, Mayor, looking at this, trying to see how we're phasing that in. I couldn't see that phase in because of that third split. So appreciate that question.
Question, I guess, follow up on the initial question is we're going off of what's in New World right now or has been in New World for this fiscal year. Is that
No.
plus additional, obviously, plus additional?
Okay.
Is that?
Then go ahead, Tracy.
So we have a module called position-based budgeting. In the past, I had a spreadsheet that it had every city employee listed, and I would go through and manually update it. Position-based budgeting in New World takes that operation and does it automatically. So I tell it the escalation factors for COLA, for insurance rates, and what positions and how many hours if we're bringing somebody in mid-year, and it then calculates these numbers.
Okay. So I guess my question is, are the 3 new hires through the SAFER grant for the rest of this fiscal year included in that? Or does that even matter?
For fiscal year 23, the year we're in,
Yeah.
they are not included in that budget. It would be a budget amendment.
We have one full-time.
Correct, but not at the level of these 3 new hires.
But that wouldn't affect the numbers that we're seeing in the fiscal 24.
The
Budget.
fiscal 24 is independent of 23. So I mean, you go in and update the positions to what 24 would look like. If we had full staffing, who all would that be?
Okay.
Tell it to calculate.
So the short answer is no, it would not impact 24.
Okay, that's what I just want to make sure that we're.
Yeah, and I think to speak to that a little bit, I know we've had conversations about just the notion of the current line item in this fiscal year, because of how things were done in the past, maybe that is a little inflated, and we're hoping that when we do start these full-time positions, potentially some of that will cover it.
And it's really harder to estimate on a paper call and for the officers, and it's a really complicated estimation. So it makes me more worrisome to underestimate when I'm doing it manually than to overestimate. Now I have a tool that really looks at that and can really help us be more on point.
And we're comfortable with the numbers that we're getting. I mean, this is the first time we're doing it, obviously, so, and it took a long time to implement, so I just want to make sure we're.
Yeah, I would say we are comfortable. In fact, there were numerous email exchanges and pacing back and forth between offices saying, "Are you sure this is right?" And then I'd get a response or a data
Yes.
sheet saying,
Or flip my screen around and let him see the calculations, because we can see what it shows. Like, I'm going to use Grant as an example. When I did the first calculation, Grant's salary came in like at $30,000. I'm like, well, we're good. So, but no, there's those cross checks, so you can look at it and really see if there's something that's an outlier or something that just doesn't look right. So,
Chief, is this your first Lucas device request?
It is. We currently have a Lucas device, but it was a hand-me-down from Johnson County Ambulance. That's Lucas 2. And you'll notice, I know you're aware that a Lucas device doesn't cost $10,000. It's more like 17 or 18.
Mm-hmm.
We're hoping to do a little bit of a partnership with the foundation, the Firefighters Foundation.
Can you tell the rest of us what a Lucas device is?
Lucas device is an automated machine that we put around a person in cardiac arrest that doesn't have a heartbeat, and it will do compressions for us much more efficiently, much more effectively. So ever since we started using them, our success rates have definitely increased.
Outstanding.
That's vital.
And then
Yeah, okay.
with your command/EMS vehicle, are you trying to combine something here that you haven't done before to save money, or why is it a command and EMS response?
Yeah, so this is kind of trying to look at this kind of a couple of problems with a practical approach. 3 or 4 years ago, we had this old red car that was just, we just weren't going to put any money into it. It had a cracked head gasket, whatnot, and we needed something fast in order to not only send people off to training, but also use to go down to the ER and pick up firefighters that went in the back of the ambulance. There's just a lot of errand running. And so the police department was good enough. They had 3 vehicles they were getting rid of that year. And so Creighton was good enough to take a look at them, and we got the best of the 3. But we also knew that at some point we would need to replace that vehicle. So fast forward 3 years, and the doors are falling in on the inside. The seat's really bad. It shakes now when you go down the road. We try not to send it too far away. But ultimately, it's our training vehicle. And what we're seeing is with us standing up our training facilities now, we're seeing a lot more hose and dirty garments, dirty air packs getting thrown in that vehicle. And as you can imagine, nobody wants to drive a vehicle with all of that carcinogen stuff in the vehicle. So what I'd like to do is, because this is on the replacement schedule, obviously get rid of that, but take our pickup that we're using for medical calls right now, move that out to training because it's a pickup and we can throw stuff in the back of it. And then replace that with a Tahoe that we can use for both medical response and for command vehicle. In fact, to take this a step further, one of the evolutions in our staffing plan, so to speak, we're not putting any more people to it, but a program that's going to help our operation is that we're looking to devise a program to where we can send the car home on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night with either an assistant chief or a captain. That way, I don't have to be on call 24/7. So that'll really help me take a step back too, and not be out there so much.
Fantastic.
I like the sounds of that.
Yeah, me too. All good though. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Any other questions for Chief while he's here on fire or other public safety questions?
Just one quick question, so lead time for fire trucks, I'm assuming is probably gonna be bigger than it is for a Tahoe. Is, if you're planning that in 2 years from now to get that, how long is it gonna take?
Sure. I reached out to Carl Chevrolet. They've got the state bid on those kinds of vehicles, and they also do upfitting as well. And they thought that if we placed the order in late summer, it would be here in the spring. The truck would. So certainly much better lead time. Actually, to my surprise, I thought it would be a year plus, but much better lead time to, for instance, to Guy's situation, or even our grass truck that we still haven't received a year and a half ago that we ordered it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was surprised.
We don't want to build a fire station and not have anything to put in. So
Ladder trucks are 20 months.
Anything else? Good question. All right, anything else on public safety then? Thanks, Chief. Going along.
Okay. Public Works, a pretty easy line item. This is page 11 on your PDF. Am I getting pages coming up?
Yep, you're doing great.
Great. Solid waste, as you all know, is an in and an out. This is just funding that we collect for Johnson County Refuse and then pay them for the hauling. Transit, this is proposed to remain steady this year. Currently, funding of the Coralville bus and the NLTAP program comes in. Under that, you can see in FY22 our actual expenses were 118. I suspect it'll be a little bit higher in FY23 as the NLTAP program continues to have a good pace. I noted here that there would be funding in this line item to help pay for the rapid transit route study, if that's something this group is interested in. I know we talked about it just briefly. As I noted in the email earlier today, all that would have to, the study, the proposal would have to come before the city council, MPO first, and then I assume the city council. But it's there if we need it. Any questions on?
How much is earmarked for the study?
There isn't an amount earmarked, Brent. We just kept that budget item the same.
What's a request from MPO or the county?
There isn't one.
There isn't one yet.
Yeah,
No.
it just hasn't.
I'm sure we'll even know in January.
Increase in NLTAP, do we know a percentage from year over year for ridership?
No, not off the top of my head, but it's a report that Angela puts together every few months, so I'll see where she's at. We've had her working on budget stuff here this month, but we'll get something here in January or early February. Okay. I will note that the very next page is Health and Social Services. This is a topic we'll tackle again at the next meeting. This goes to the social service grants that you all review and approve, and so we can talk about that at the next meeting. I will note that last year we injected $150,000 of ARPA money into the general fund to fund this. This year we're not proposing that. So let's jump to page 14 then, Community and Economic Development. Economic Development line item is at $140,000. This is where we pay ICAD. We take money out to assist Blues and Barbecue. We are UNESCO members and have been since its inception at $10,000 in the Entrepreneurial Development Center at $10,000. That leaves about $5,000 or so in case any other marketing or economic development expenses come up. You'll see planning and zoning remains relatively stable, no significant changes there. And then in communications, we have a couple, one significant change, and that is adding an events assistant position, a mid-year start. Again, noted in my email, we're thinking that, of course, this position would help manage and operate the new Centennial Center. As we noted, we're going to need someone in advance of the opening to help manage. In addition, though, this would help with some existing workload in the communications department. And Nick and I had a good conversation today, and I know he's if you have questions, certainly he'll be willing to speak. But I think one thing I would just point out is that through through COVID, as some of the things we would do, like Blues and Barbecue or Beat the Bitter, we weren't doing, but we then added some other things to our workload, like the Good Neighbor program, and I'm sorry, I can't think of some other. City Slate, thank you. And so now we're doing all those things and things we were doing pre-COVID, and looking at hopefully adding the Centennial Center. And so that's our justification here to move forward with this position. So I think I'll end it there for community economic development and let you folks ask some questions.
This new events assistant is not contingent on approval of the event center, or is it? Or the Centennial Center?
Well, I think in Nick's world, he'd like me to say no, it's not. But I think as we move forward, we need to evaluate where we are with that center. Obviously, our hope is that we hear from Destination Iowa. And now I guess I'm saying in February. We were hoping it was going to be before the end of the year. We're told that they've just have been somewhat slow on responding to all applicants. But I think regardless of that grant, if we have the master plan, then, and if we don't get it, we have to look at phasing this project, and probably taking off, biting off the center first, I would suspect. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I think we would, before we pulled the trigger on it, we would make sure we're moving forward with the Centennial Center.
I'm going to preface this question with forgive my ignorance, but can you explain a little bit about what our $75,000 contribution to ICAD procures for the city?
Sure. So ICAD is our economic development arm, and so they one of the things they do regularly for us is go out and meet with businesses and talk about. And when I say businesses, I mean they call them interstate businesses, the Heartlands and the Centros, Maytag of the world, to get feedback on how the city's doing for them, how their world is moving forward in terms of employment and their challenges and what they can be doing. But then also when we have a prospect, they work for the cities in Johnson County, so they work with them equally. But then when a prospect's zoned in on an area, then they go to bat, whether it be for us or for Coralville. They've been, I think, a really terrific partner, and Russ works with them as well. When we get requests for 30,000 square feet of building or 5 acres of ground, we're going back and forth with them to see if we can make something work.
So is that fee assessed to any partnership from a city, or is that in relation to the amount of involvement they have with North Liberty?
It's there's not a formula. Coralville and Iowa City both contribute more. I don't know how much more. Iowa City's quite a bit more, obviously. When I first started here, I think we were given 15,000 when you and I first got on here, and we've bumped that up as we've grown, and certainly have gotten more from them over the years. But there's no set formula. They'll go out. I think it might even be in 23. They'll probably start another 5-year campaign. Every 5 years or so, they try to go out and visit with their funders. So it's local governments, it's the university, it's P&G and Maytag and the big employers around, contractors, etc.
Gotcha.
Help fund them.
So these four will hear the broken record and they're sick of hearing it, but I'll say it every year in budget time. I've been the most critical of ICAD on this council since I came. I've since, more broadly understood what they do and what they bring. I still question the 75,000. Ryan and I have agreed to disagree for 3 going on 4 years now. That we are large enough to employ our own economic development person that's out selling North Liberty every day. He doesn't agree, and we've agreed to disagree with that. So ICAD has helped with that. I think most recently, I have to be careful here, we were very close to closing a big deal with a company. Unfortunately, we lost, but they were highly involved in that. True?
Very true, yeah.
Okay, so there has been some, delivery on that most recently, and that's really been the bigger one that I've seen since I've been on council. But they were integrally involved in a almost closing a deal. Back to Nick's position, and this is just tying both of these things together, I think Centennial is going to make a go, and I think that we'll have that center, and this could be beneficial. If for some reason future councils decide no, or something occurs and we can't do that, maybe this is the economic development person that I've been talking about for 4 years. Because if he's going to be down to 50% because he or she doesn't have a center to program for, then I'm just planting the seed that might be a possibility.
And kind of coinciding that, I think it also begs the question, would they be open to perhaps a hybrid structure where we taper back the fee that we're giving them, and then maybe allot funds for someone that could work internally within ICAD or internally with us, that focuses their attention predominantly on North Liberty. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that it's a large sum of money that's worth further conversation, perhaps. I don't know if this is an appropriate time, but
As Ryan mentioned, they do a 5-year campaign. So if this is the year, we'll get to have that request with them directly. And that 75,000 has been a static number for the last 5 years as a result of their last campaign.
What's the status with their director position?
So the ICAD and the business partnership are working on a merger, and assuming that the two boards can agree, that would take place in July, at which point they would look to hire a director for the newly formed joint group. As it stands now, Tom Banta is the acting or interim director.
Will that come with renaming of the identities?
I imagine it will. There's two groups that'll be working through that, one on each, from each board.
I hope our mayor is intricately involved in that.
I don't know that they've established anything just yet. Just a note on the economic development comment. I'm happy to visit in more detail about ICAD, and I'll give you the same spiel I gave Brent. But one of the things Nick and I have talked about is, Jillian is really plugged into the community, into the corridor, and have talked about and looked for ways to get her more involved in some of the economic development related work for this city. And so we just spoke this afternoon about it, and when we get this little thing here put to bed in terms of the budget, we'll be talking more and hopefully implementing some changes there as well.
So this would free up, take a guess of percentage of her time.
I mean, at least a quarter of it, I think would be fair. We're looking to shift, get some additional support for neighborhood ambassadors out of this. We're looking to get 8 to 12 additional sort of city slate size events. Those all take obviously significant time for her.
And I think a little bit of it, if you need to get a bigger name for you for what all you do.
True.
Good point. Something we're working on. We realize we've probably outgrown the communications department. And so I think we'll be talking about that this first quarter of the new year as well.
Appreciate it.
I'll move on to general government unless there are other questions. Well, we thought we should keep paying the mayor and council, so see that's in there as a recurring expense. In the administration budget, we're proposing to add one new full-time desktop technician. This is a mid-year start. You saw some of my stats this afternoon in the email, but we think the position is easily justifiable and certainly worth the investment. Just a note here, it's not noted in here, but this is election year, so we have $7,500 included for that. Legal and tort, no significant changes. And then same in personnel, really no significant changes. That final personnel line item is where we pay unemployment insurance or compensation, immunizations, some safety supplies, legal fees for when we are bargaining or have a grievance that we need some assistance on. All comes out of that line item.
Before we move on to item 5, sorry, Brian, could I just get your opinion on Health and Human Services providing a modest bump in that? I know we put a lot in there in 22 for it. You'll see the number. I'm thinking maybe just a 3% increase, just a little bit of a bump. We never have enough money when we have that conversation, and I don't expect that we'll get less than 150,000 requested. So if we bump that up to a 3% increase, maybe another $4,500.
I'm sorry, Chris, where is this?
Up on the Health and Social Services page 12 of our PDF.
Oh, okay.
It's just the same number that we had in the budget as last year, 150,000. We had a lot more than that in requests last year, so.
Well, I think
you guys think
if
about
we're
that?
looking at percentages of increase, I mean, just as we are with the department heads, we need to consider what the inflation rate's been this year. I mean, just the services coming back alone with their inflationary increases will be, to your point, much more than the initial ask would be my guess.
How do you
So
guys feel about that?
I don't know that if we're going to do the increase, I guess my point is I don't know that 3%, certainly something, but I don't know that 3% does it.
Okay.
So I'm not opposed to increasing it some. I'm not sure that that's the best way to fund it right now, though. I mean, we'll have some extra ARPA money. If we want to do that, we have our policy at the end of the year of using some of this leftover so that we keep our balance. Maybe we can make it the policy that some of that would then come back to that, specifically, because I don't think we have a policy of what we do with that, other than we do something with it. Maybe we could dedicate a chunk of that back, and we'd have to talk about it a little bit. But
Yeah, that will just leave us short this year because we go into that social services conversation.
yeah, it would have to get going next
50,000.
year.
Yeah, we'd have to start it up. So we would need some seed money for it this year, but I agree. That could be something we could write in and plant annually. What kind of an increase should we budget? I know that this makes our conversation at that time a little bit easier if we've got just a little bit more in there than we did the previous year.
I would say 3% is a starting, place. Not saying that it will be sufficient enough, but I do believe it's a starting.
What's precedent? I mean,
What's
what if,
precedent? It's been a dollar amount, honestly, whatever we felt like, and we kind of have based it on the previous year's ask. There's usually one entity or two that ask for so much that we really don't ever fund them, but at the end of the conversation, we get pretty close with the ask. We don't get to satisfy everybody, but we get some to everybody.
are other cities doing this as well?
In Johnson County.
In Johnson
they are.
County? Okay.
Yeah.
And how would you say North Liberty ranks in terms of our giving with other cities of our size? Are we large contributors or are we middle of the pack?
I think, I don't think there's a good way to compare because Iowa City has a totally different revenue stream and federal money that they get to manipulate. It's probably not the right word.
Allocate.
But allocate. Thank you.
I gotcha.
Distribute. And I would say we are pretty steady with Coralville, though, based on I haven't had a conversation with them this year about this year's budget, but I think last year we were pretty comparable.
The other thing that I've noticed when we do this, that there are some organizations that just don't serve North Liberty residents because they don't have a place or anything like that. So as they're, getting into North Liberty, they're coming in and asking, but their asks are generally smaller than the more established organizations. And Iowa City is very heavily like social services there. Coralville probably is very similar to us. So that's what I've noticed.
So those of you that have seen this budget request or this budget conversation and now the budget request that come out, what's a dollar amount we should put in there? Because this is something we'll have to stick to in April or so when we have this conversation.
So if we're gonna do that, I would do $5,000, just basically looking at what we awarded.
Yeah.
Okay.
Last year, that's kind of would be, the math probably will work a little easier.
Okay.
I was going to say 4%, which is 6. I guess I'd be agreeable there, but one thing that really impressed me after last year's process was the collaboration that took place in this room during and post.
Yeah.
And those that walked away with less than they asked for, or those that walked away with nothing, didn't walk away with nothing. And I have not seen that at a council chambers. Being a council nerd and watching all of these for years, I've never seen that happen before. I hope we can facilitate that environment again this year, and maybe speaking to it, Mayor, in the intro or something to open those lines of communication with those that are here. And it was fun to be a part of that last year.
Awesome.
I think there was more of that came out of it really than the money.
Yeah, I agree.
I think also we spent more of our ARPA money on social programs than some of the other folks did.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't quite show up in there.
So 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. It's a number you feel?
I'm good with 5,000.
5,000. Okay. Eric, Ashley.
I mean, I really don't have much history in this, so I trust your expertise.
Well, don't cut yourself short. You were part of this allocation of monies last year, so you
Yeah,
know
and
what
I was
that-
thoroughly
You know what it
impressed.
felt like then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Eric,
I was going to say 15.
interesting.
I mean, the need is there. It's not getting less.
Should we settle back to someplace between Brent and Eric?
I'd probably stay with the 5 and we have we have other things we can look at later.
I think with the injection of ARPA and some of the things, the increases we were able to do for the food pantry specifically, that was a huge help for them.
Yeah.
I'd be good with 5.
Got a consensus on 5 there.
155.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, sorry, Brian.
Just-
Yeah,
I just
did
wanted
have a
to-
question.
One thing, I was looking at the mayor and council and stuff, so just surprisingly, we get off pretty cheap with the mayor. So a lot of the mayors, even in the tiny towns around us, are paying their mayor the same amount as we are. So I think as that position's going up, I think it's somewhere along the line, we're gonna need to probably think about increasing that a little bit, to make it more with our, with the mayor of North Liberty's peers, in the bigger cities, and just, you're not, West Branch pays the mayor the same as we do.
Well, what we could do is perhaps mayor and council do a little salary survey, because any change that's made wouldn't take effect with this elected body. I believe it has to wait until the next election. So we would have some time there, but I'll just make a note that we look at that. Folks can decide from there. Project for you, Deb, before retirement. Okay. Anything else on general government then? Okay, well then let's jump to page 21 of your packet and talk about road use tax. This fund remains strong. You can see with the ending balance there. I can tell you that FY '23, you can see we budgeted just over almost $2.6 million. We're on pace to hit almost 2.9 million in FY '23. I say that by simply doing the math of taking we've received half our revenue, multiplying it by 2. However, things can change. It is based on use and people buying gas and registering vehicles. So that's why we are always a bit conservative here. You can see, though, that the fund balance is strong. As such, we're proposing to dip into that fund balance a little bit this year with with a number of things. Why don't I just start from the top, though? What we're proposing here is add 1 new full-time laborer. It's been a while since we've done that here, and obviously our transportation system continues to expand and grow, as do the responsibilities of the department. So this would be beneficial. Keep in mind that the streets department doesn't just deal with streets; they actually deal with storm sewer, collections on the sanitary sewer side, animal control, and pretty much anything we call Michael for. So they are very responsive department. So from an equipment standpoint, we're looking at replacing a dump truck with the attachments. You can see those, that's a $300,000 expense, and then a utility ATV. And I won't do this justice, so I'm going to let Michael explain this, and I'm guessing he can give you something to Google to talk, so you can see what exactly we're looking at here. But it'd be a pretty handy piece of equipment. And then the bigger expense here is $600,000 to renovate a bay within the existing shop. To add some additional office spaces, a conference room, a space for their sign making equipment. And this, again, is to accommodate our staffing needs. If you've been down to the shop, you know that we have, how many guys now total do you have?
Count me 9.
So we have
We're
7.
down 1 right now, but
We have 7 of those guys in one area.
6.
6. Okay.
6.
So it's pretty tight in there, and so this would improve efficiencies there. Overall, we're looking at a deficit this year of about $760,000. Again, that's based on pretty conservative revenue estimating, but still having close to $2 million in the fund after FY24. Now, if we get the revenues that we anticipate, we'll be well over $2 million at the end of '24. In fact, it could be that we're closer to $3 million at the end of FY23. If you take a look, we're proposing to be at about 2.6. But as I mentioned earlier, revenues are on pace to do quite a bit more than that. So, and interestingly, just so you can understand the challenge of predicting revenue, in FY23, we projected about $125.50 per capita for the revenue stream. That was based on the league's, one of the league reports. We're on pace to receive about $141 per person. In FY22, those are actual numbers. It came in at $135 per capita. In FY24, we've budgeted $128, again based on some guidance from the League of Cities, and which they get from the DOT. So I think this goes along with our budgeting practice of being conservative, so that we continue to keep our cash balances healthy. So I'll stop there, and if you have questions for Michael, fire away.
That's the most expensive ATV I've ever seen. What is it?
So, over the course of the last 5 years, we've purchased a skid loader, and this piece of equipment, it's called a tool cat. So it's basically a skid loader that is combined with a gator that's combined with it's about the size of a gator, but it's got the lifting capacity or close to lifting capacity of what a skid loader attachment or a skid loader would be. What we've done is we've purchased things for our skid loader, like a stump grinder, broom, buckets, grapple hooks for derecho, things like that. The reason this piece of machinery is more expensive than a gator is it accommodates all those attachments. So you can use that on multiple pieces of equipment.
So you can use this and the skid loader now. So you can have two different pieces of that equipment going out there, or those attachments. Okay.
Correct. And I don't see those attachments going away as far as trading or upgrading or things like that. The reason we purchased those were with the idea that as the city grew, you would be able to use those on multiple pieces of equipment. And this allows that.
Is this a tracked vehicle or wheels?
Wheeled. Corville, I think, has a couple. You'll see them doing some snow removals on the trails and things like that during the year. But versatile. That's why a lot of the cost is there.
You'll be able to get an idea of what it is.
It's the only type vehicle that I'm aware of that has that ability.
This might be a really silly question, but from my recollection, we changed the brine mixture for the snow removal. Is that accurate, or?
We didn't change it. We just had the ability to make it.
Okay.
Before, we never had a facility to do it until I believe it was three years ago that we were able to build a facility to actually produce it ourselves.
And do we find that that's been successful or
beneficial?
Okay.
So a great example of this is last Thursday when it started to spit and mist and started to just freeze up just a little bit. So we were able to send trucks out to brine instead of using dry material, which you use more of that material. That material's about salt, rock salt is about $100 a ton right now. You get 870 gallons of brine from 1 ton of salt. So you're able to go a longer distance, use less material, better for the environment. That doesn't work every time. Not every storm is going to absorb it like that, but it is beneficial for pre-treating, and I think it's done well. It's done well.
So Ryan, I'm sorry, go ahead. You should go ahead. Is there a minimum balance that we have to maintain in the fund?
No, not legally.
Okay.
when Tracy and I talk about numbers, you know, 25%, 30% is always ideal, depending on the situation. In utilities, we want to keep it a little bit higher in case something might happen. Here, you know, depending on whether we do a special census or not, we may be able to see that population jump up mid-decade and help put more money into this fund. So I think here, I don't know that we'd want to get below 25%. I'd be uneasy if we were.
So typically with larger purchases like this, $500,000 or more, we see department heads coming, you know, at least a year in advance and splitting, or 2 years and saying, hey, this is a large, you know, maybe it's, you know, CEP, but fire truck purchases, for example, where we're putting it away. So what's facilitating? Is it, I haven't heard anything about the renovation to the building. Is this just necessitated by the need staffing wise and the ability to be able to do it and still have fund balance? Or where's this coming from where we didn't lead into it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And we actually had been talking about it internally for a while. It is on the CIP, and so we were kind of planning for it. And as one of the things we wanted to do though before we move forward on is to make sure we had an adequate fund balance. And so over the years, as we've been able to build that fund balance up, it makes sense now to move forward. Additionally, it's going to be real challenging long-term to add another staff person without adding some additional space for that person.
How much are you going to miss the bay that you're renovating?
Well, personally, I like to have all the equipment inside. It weathers better. It lasts longer. But I need people, right? So I have to pick and choose what we need the best use of the space is. So we'll pick those lower ticket items that need to sit outside. That unfortunately, that's just a sacrifice that we'll have to make. The bigger ticket items, the more expensive items, the critical items, we'll have to, you know, we'll still use those and keep them inside.
Most of it, will it be in the cold storage area, or are you going to have to keep some things out yet?
So I'm thinking pickups for one, things like that, daily use trucks. Those would probably just be in parking lot storage. Mm-hmm. Other things like maybe street sweeper that doesn't go out as much in the winter time, that would be a cold storage type item.
For reference, cold storage, we have a large building down there that's not insulated, no heat or air or anything.
How many square feet would that be?
It's a great, it's 2 bays. The bays are 14 feet tall by 14 feet wide. The doors are. Square footage, I'm not for sure. It'd be the stretch of the bays from the east to the west.
We take those big doors out and then just build up against the exterior wall, or?
So, working with Shive a little bit on what's possible. I mean, that's the first step is knowing what's there and what we can work with. We would eliminate one bay door on the west side and utilize the east side bay door for shipment supplies and be able to fork sign material in its location.
There's not a lot of office space. That was one of the things when we built it, it's like,
Sure.
boy, there's really not a lot of office space in here to do stuff. And there's storage for still the traffic signaling stuff. And
Yeah, yes.
so there's a lot of stuff in that office. It's really not where people can actually work.
Break room, conference room, workstations, that's all the same area, which is, I was looking over there, if you square that corner off, that's about what it is currently. So this is an attempt to stay ahead of the growth a little bit, make sure we're staffed adequately to handle the growth that we're seeing in the subdivisions, the growth in the streets that we're adding, and the infrastructures that we're adding. So.
maybe I should have asked this during public safety, but I know there was a request for someone to do animal control and some other things. How much time is Streets spending doing that kind of thing right now?
So it's a collaboration between Streets and the police department, obviously, and it's a great question, but a tough question to answer because any certain day you may not have to deal with anything animal control. The next day, someone may be on the phone all day trying to track things down, follow up on animal control items, process. So I put it in my monthly report on how much we deal directly with it. Probably anywhere from 7 to 12 to 15 animals per month that we'll deal with. And then I know the police department's dealing with quite a bit more than that because they do operate 24/7.
Sure. I guess I would be in favor of having that hire added back in, especially if we think we're going to get $150,000 out of the backfill. But I don't know how anyone else feels about that.
If you had one new person in, the new person, that's not their dedicated and stuff. So it would, I guess, dilute out some of the animal control. It'll at least somebody else will be able to do it for a little bit and maybe see how things go.
Yeah, exactly. This new person would be an entry-level position that would be working with veteran guys, learning the ropes on concrete repairs, cleaning maintenance structures, storm sanitary, the things that we do.
That's the one that's currently in the budget.
That we're requesting, correct?
Yeah. That's not the one that was a joint request.
No.
Right.
Correct.
If we were to do that, that would be someone who was designated for that purpose along with ticketing, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, be multiple responsibility. I think we estimate about 50% animal control and then the remaining 50% admin work, basically in the police department. If we added 64K back in, I mean, I can do the math here quick, but I'm not.
I realize that we'd be looking at a property tax increase as a result, probably, right?
If you want me to figure that out, I can real quick.
Well, it'd be less than half of 13 cents, right? So.
Yeah.
How about we work that through and talk about it Tuesday next week when we have actual, like real good numbers to talk about it with?
Certainly can. Is there interest in?
Do you need consensus, Mayor, from council for the work to be done by staff?
I mean, if no one's interested, if only one is interested.
Yeah, no, I'm equally interested. I think we have some surplus that we didn't have when the day started or when this memo went out. So, but I think having the budget there for it or giving them some latitude to look at it, Brent, would be okay. Whether or not they want to go through and do it, because they probably have been kind of sidelined on it for a little while, is going to be up to you. So
it won't take a whole lot on our end.
Okay.
So we can, if folks want to see what it looks like, we can do it.
Was this the most pressing issue at the moment in terms of priority? I guess my question would be, is this something that you would want to make a huge priority in terms of expending?
Is this next up on the priority list overall for the city budget, is the question?
Yeah, I think it would.
Thank you for re-articulating.
Yes. This was just a priority I didn't feel we could fit in without an additional tax increase. Based on the numbers we had last week. Now we have this new 150, which I understand is a game changer, but we can certainly look at it. But the mayor mentioned surplus, and I just want to clarify that as it is now, with the new 150, taking the old 150 out, if that makes sense, we still are at a negative $94,000, a deficit of $94,000. But we can run a scenario.
I don't mind the look, but I will not be in favor of increasing the levy for it, for sure.
I think that was staff's position ultimately when this conversation started. So I'm in the same camp that Brent is in right now. This wasn't this was an expense they were okay walking away from, and if we don't have the money for it, I don't want to ask for additional revenues to make it happen yet this year. But I think I heard them say that the ask wouldn't take very long to figure
We'll
out.
put some options, easy option, or we'll put the
Sound
work
right?
together, yeah.
Head nods.
We'll get some scenarios for you guys to look at. Good data.
Anything else on road use? Okay, if not, we're gonna jump to the water
Thank you.
budget.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks.
Which is page 24. Not a whole lot of change here. Water revenues are looking good. The FY, if you look in the FY '23 column, our water sales are actually projected to come in higher than the 4.123, probably going to be maybe closer to 4.2 or even greater. Again, it'll depend on how wet or dry our spring is. We've budgeted a conservative growth in '24 with no revenue increase. The one point I'd just make, what some of the costs we're seeing increase here are chemicals to treat the water. Obviously, utilities is a big expense here. And then we have about $240,000 approximately budgeted for water meters this year. It's over $100,000 more than what we usually budget for. We're having a real problem with supply, and Greg can talk about that a bit. But we want to make some relatively big purchases so we have them on hand, just because it takes so long to get these. If you want to learn more about that, Greg can speak to that. We're setting aside $80,000 for membrane replacement. Again, this is similar to our sewer plant where we have membranes treating the water and planning for their replacement down the road. And then looking at replacing of the cargo van as well as the tractor that has been in use for a while. You'll see here again that the fund balance change is $7,800 for the better for the year. In future years, we're showing deficits. Again, I think that will change as revenue projections change. But also, we're as we move into the later years, we're paying more debt for the water plant. We structured that to pay more as we move forward. You can kind of see that throughout that schedule. Otherwise, feel pretty comfortable with the water budget here. Questions for Greg or myself?
So the replacement of the membranes, is that one or is that multiple?
Well, we're setting aside funding, so we're not actually replacing them.
Okay.
So Greg, do you remember the schedule? I don't remember.
So they have a 5-year life expectancy. Most of the plants that have our type of membrane are still using them well over 10 years. Total cost originally was about $500,000 to change them all. So we've been setting some money aside each year in case we have to do that. So right now, currently, things look well. We did a chemical clean for the first time here a few months ago, and all the numbers came back to where they were originally. So potentially we should be out quite a ways before we have to replace those.
And when that happens, do you replace them all at the same time, or do you replace them? Is there is the bad one going to cause the others to just deteriorate?
It just depends. The way the hydraulics work at the treatment plant, while they're similar, they're a little bit different. Just where they run coming off of the pipe. the raw water comes in and it runs all the way down to one end of the building. And then, you know, obviously, depending on which units we're running, the unit at the far end winds up probably with the most flow versus the next two in line, if that makes sense. There's also some things that happen internally. There's shims in there and different gaskets, and as those, you know, compact, you can have issues there where we may, to answer your question, I can't answer it, I guess. It just depends on what we see in the future, I guess, if that makes sense. I will add one thing also in the van. I didn't catch this till now, but we're actually looking to add a van, not replace the current one that we have. We're looking to the van. That's our water meter service vehicle that we use. It's outfitted with mainly, you know, everything we would need to go into a residence or a commercial area, change out the meters. They have some lab equipment. We use it for reading water meters. It's just been a really, really handy piece of equipment, but it's also probably used the most out of any of the vehicles that we have. So when it would be down, creates another issue, but we're also looking at going to a fully electric transit van. The lead times are out at least a year, they're telling me, from the time you would place an order. But then the van that we currently have is going to be shifted to the lab technician. During COVID, we were kind of leaning towards putting sample stations throughout town. Every day we collect samples in the distribution system, and you try and get those samples so you have a good overview of the entire system. Prior to having the sample stations, we tended to have to use commercial buildings, you know, doctor's offices, daycares, that kind of thing. Those tend to be, you know, in certain areas, and residential areas, not so much. We had a harder time collecting samples in those areas. Then COVID hit, and we went ahead and we had 9 remote sample stations prior to COVID. And I think now we have 21 or 22 of them. I'd have to go back and look. But we use those every day. The lab tech, you know, obviously we're kind of dependent on the weather when we're collecting samples at the stations. So if the weather's bad, we wind up taking a utility tent out there, and 2 people go. We hold the tent so the person can collect the sample. Our thought process is we'll move that van to that position. They'll be able to collect the sample in a container, get it into the van, fill out paperwork, rinse glassware, that kind of stuff. So, and it'll still be outfitted with all the equipment it has now, so you could take it out on a meter call, or, you know, if you had to shut a water main down or something, it'll have all that equipment as well.
Questions for Greg or this category?
Mayor, I would just say the water staff and leadership have been responsive the last few years on the grumblings of this body about the rates. And that's what we hear the most, you know, when we are out and talking about what it costs to live here. That's the first thing that people, you know, talk about. So very grateful for your leadership and the way that your team operates. And you guys always are very mindful of the rate increases, and you've done a phenomenal job. So I appreciate it very much.
I just want to, excuse me, want to make sure I understood what you said. Did you say that this new van is going to be all electric, or is that something you're looking at in the future?
They have a Ford Transit van that now is all electric. So that's what we're looking at purchasing. And the cost that's there would include the purchase of the vehicle, a charging station. When you buy those vans, they basically come as a shell. So you've got to buy the shelving and outfit the equipment there as well. So, and we figure a little bit in there for an electrician to wire the station.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll move on to wastewater then. And again, the fund balance here is looking strong, over 5 million. You might ask, why so big? Well, we have some significant debt payments coming down the road. You can see it gets as high as almost 1.9 million in FY28. And you can see there's a lot of red in that change in fund balance that was planned for We increased rates well prior to the project to help pay for those debt service payments. So you can see over the course of time, and again, I would say every year you go out, it's a little bit more difficult to project, but we're sitting really strong right now. A couple of things I would note, again, chemicals, here's a significant cost, not only at the plant, but at the lift stations, and Drew can speak more to that if you're interested. And then another one is sludge hauling. I think you've all been to that plant and have seen that building way in the back that holds all the sludge. It's a nice word for something else. And that has to get hauled out. And as our population continues to grow and continue to treat sewer, that building fills up quicker. And so we hire a company to come in, a company that's certified through the DNR, takes care of all the paperwork, any reporting requirements, and then they haul out several times a year. So the need for that continues to grow. And then just from an equipment and capital standpoint, here again, membranes, we're actually budgeting for almost $295,000 this year for that, and moving forward, this is again, similar to what Greg just talked about, we're going to have to replace these membranes. We've replaced some already. And if you are interested, I'm sure Drew can elaborate on how we've extended the life of these also. It's very impressive. And then just a couple, we're looking to purchase a couple spare pumps, and then an attachment for the skid loader down there. Questions for us on wastewater?
Are you seeing a big lead time in getting spare parts and things too? Or
Yeah, very significant, especially with the events that we've had in 2022 being the flood in March of our MBR building, and then a fire of a piece of equipment in October. Lead times are anywhere from 6 months to 8 months. Sometimes they'll tell you it's 4 weeks and they can get a part rebuilt, but then there'll be one item of, say, a drive, a small card that we need to make it work, and that could be delayed as far as, like, I'm here next August now for a $700 part. So we've actually reached out to some other cities that have similar equipment that might have taken it offline and offered to purchase it from them or borrow or just other means of getting up and running on something that we might have a part of some spare equipment, but we need one other component to make it work. And a lot of that was largely just due to the amount of equipment that went down at once in both of those events.
So staying ahead of the game with spare parts is a good idea.
Yeah, and I think, overall, just the amount of, like I said, the amount of equipment that did go down at once, and the ability to recover, I think we were very fortunate to have the spare parts we had. We were dropping motors in and taking the original ones that were flooded up to Cedar Rapids, getting them baked out within 6 hours back in service. So not only just getting running, just having another spare or redundant to offset, because sometimes we only keep one spare, but we've got multiple pieces of equipment that just work as redundancy in normal day-to-day operations. So yeah, lead times for parts, shipping costs have gone up astronomically. The freight for chemical, it just seems to it just keeps exceeding what we expect as it comes. It's still cheaper to ship our chemical from Georgia than to get it made, from local manufacturers in the Davenport area. So we do look at prices, we do look at where we're spending those costs, but obviously take what chemical works best for our application and at the best cost too. And the large chemical use, two areas of chemical use. One, polymer being for biosolids, which is hauled out to those farm fields. As Ryan said, increasing due to just the demand that's coming into the sewer plant. We have to waste more. So if we waste more, we have more biosolids to treat. We dewater it. It fills up our building faster. We need more farm ground or just land space available. So that's getting harder to come by as we, expand out on the city. We're having to push further and further out. And even if we follow all the regulations, there will always be complaints. Regulations are getting harder for, industries like just wastewater in general in Connecticut and New Hampshire, I think. They both have banned land application of wastewater, so they're having to pay to incinerate and then haul it to a landfill. Just due to newfound plastic chemicals found in water and wastewater called PFAS or PFOA. So there's a lot of litigation going on that right now. So.
Well, I'd say it's been a challenging year for Drew with the flood and the fire. And I remember when we started this plant up in 2008, and I was just scratching my head at the number we had to budget for spare parts. But over those years, they've really come in handy in these two instances. In 1 year, we just have to have them there because everyone's going to flush a toilet, and we got to have a place for it to go.
Yeah, and just in general, that flood took out all of our secondary treatment for 15 and a half hours. So that means we weren't even going through our primary treatment. We were just sending everything up to equalization basin, untreated, and the clock's ticking. Every second that stuff's down, we're just sweating it. Like, how do we get going? Good staff, able to work safely through that stuff. Just mitigating the equipment, the areas that had electrical components of it, and then just having good contractors that were able to come in immediately, get the electricity that we needed to certain pieces of equipment, and then controls and integration that stuck around and helped us get everything going. So 15 and a half hours on the flood, and the fire department was unbelievable help, along with PD with our fire that we had. Safety protocols, just making sure that it was okay to enter the building, and just get things shut down properly, and then therefore us to start the recovery process on it. So it all happened within hours on both events. So those are both open items, insurance items. So we have incurred a lot of these costs and expenses, and even throughout the years in our spare parts, we've used a lot of that for these repairs on both of these insurance claims, and a lot of that's coming out of our operating budget or previous operating budgets. So we're hoping to get all of our reimbursements back through those claims.
Well, we hope you have a much less eventful year.
Yeah, we're ready for 2023. So.
Yeah, thanks, Drew.
Thank you, Drew.
Move on to the last utility, and that is stormwater, and it's one that has been on our radar and talked about the last couple years, and I think most of you have heard me talk about the potential for a revised billing structure. Our stormwater utility is unique in that we're one of the very few that just charge a flat rate to everyone. Most stormwater utilities charge based on the amount of square footage that a business or property might have, and so we're getting close to having the data needed for the council to consider such an endeavor. Russ has taken the lead on the GIS data. Tracy and Mary in the utility department are working on how we would move this over, or how we would adjust in our new software. It's helpful that our neighbor to the south, Coralville, has the same software, so we're comparing notes with them. I'm hopeful that in April we'll be able to start the discussion with the city council, and if there's willingness to proceed, start a public education campaign so folks understand what we're looking at here and what we're trying to accomplish. That said, the budget here looks pretty looks rough because we don't have the revenues to support the potential expenditures. We'll what we're showing are projects that we'd like to get completed, although much like we said in FY23, we'll need to evaluate that on whether or not we have the revenues to do that. So what you're seeing here is a piece of equipment being purchased, a mini vac unit, and Michael can talk on that if you'd like to, but it's basically allows us to get into much tighter spots with storm sewer jams versus our large, if you've seen our huge vac truck. And then just a few stormwater improvement projects, smaller than, for example, the Heritage Drive project we're doing now. Each of these projects are smaller than that, but obviously incrementally they add up to significant expense. So this is something we're just going to have to keep an eye on and monitor. We aren't going to let it get to the negative fund balance that you're seeing. I'm showing this just from just so you can see that some action is needed if we're going to continue to fund these projects this way.
And to pick up on that, the conversation we'll start in April is about how much we can change this formula. And if the revenues can be started in July, FY24, that starts the collection. We won't actually receive the dollars, I don't believe. And we don't receive those right away, or do we receive those starting right away?
We would if
There's
we
a little bit of
started
a delay.
in July.
In July,
well, then it'd probably be the August bills that go out, but yeah.
Yeah.
But we'd have an idea of where it was going to go.
We would, yes. By the time we are only going to be presenting you an option when we have solid revenue projections and are able to show you how it impacts businesses or the folks with large impervious areas. Any questions on any of that?
How many of these biocells do we have in town? We have a number. They're very expensive to repair.
Guy or Michael? Do
Maybe just refresh my memory on what they do, Michael.
So we've got 10 with the new Phase 5 of Ranchaw along Phase 5, Centennial Park area, Penn Meadows area. I think that is all. Centennial's obviously pretty large, and then a lot of smaller sized ones along Ranchaw.
It's for runoff.
So it's a stormwater quality effect. Basically absorbs that runoff, oils, sediment, things like that, and is able to treat that stormwater as it goes through the earth. They're not a one and done. You buy it and good to go from there. I mean, they're like anything that there's maintenance to them and upkeep and. But it is what you see here. It's similar to what you see as you make your way down Ranchaw onto Core Ridge.
Can you describe what that repair, that upkeep is, how intense it is, what the intent of it is?
Sure. So currently what we do on most of our biocells are newer construction biocells. Maintenance on those, you'll see some of the line items. We have a firm come in and that maintains those once a month for 6 months a year to make sure that we don't have weed infestations, any debris that you see come off the road, solid physical debris, plastics, things like that would contribute to the stormwater not going to where it needs to go to or filtering like it needs to. So as long as we keep up on that maintenance, a low cost per month, but over time obviously adds up. Your big effect ticket of rebuilding that whole structure, removing that soil, removing that lava rock, removing those plants, installing it back in, you don't have to go through that as soon or as often.
And that's what we'll be doing at Penn Meadows.
Correct.
And that biocell repair.
That was one of the first or
Right.
earliest ones that were completed. Now, that is in an area that's obviously got a lot of traffic around it. There's a well in there. There's walking paths. There's a lot going on in there. And I was trying to think of when that was probably produced or made. It was probably, my guess is 12 years to 15 years ago. And that's a smaller sized one. But
we haven't done anything significant to it since it was.
just regular maintenance on it. Yep.
Now that we're a bigger city, we're responsible for our stormwater runoff, to make sure it's not polluting the the streams down from here.
Your regulations and guidelines get more stringent and strict as you get bigger.
Basically,
Yes.
we have to do something with this water.
Yep.
This is one way of doing it.
It's that and also just being good stewards of the land. Yep. Responsible.
But to your point, we are what they call an MS4 city. When they created this designation, we were one of the first, I think, 20 or 21 cities across the state, and they focused on high growth, high dirt moving areas. So we have to be compliant with the DNR's annual reporting. These things all get reported on. Mike Wolf in the building department helps with a lot of that as well. So.
And we actually also, we require developers to, when they build out these stuff to facilities, but also comply with the FDDS. It's all part of a federal regime and the state level programs.
Well, that is in an hour and 40 minutes, the city's operation budget. 2 hours and 40 minutes. No, hour and 40, okay. At our next meeting, as kind of noted here on the agenda, we'll recap some of this. We'll update the social services budget. We'll have a couple scenarios or a scenario on the animal control. And then we'll dive into capital projects. And so not all these folks will be back, just a lucky few, to talk through some of the significant capital projects we hope to tackle in FY '24. Any final questions or thoughts on this operational side of things? Shouldn't say final for tonight. See if you walk away here and think of a question or a concern, you know how to get a hold of me.
So right now, we are how much behind?
In the general fund?
Yeah.
94.
Plus 5,000.
Huh?
We added 5,000.
Good point, 99, just at 100.
All right.
Okay, so the last comment I would have is just, we prepare for this evening starting in September, October, and, Tracy and I take the lion's share of the work that's been done by the department heads and try to put it in a format that's a little easier to read. But this group out here, you've heard me say it multiple times, deserves a lot of credit. They are just a selfless group that is willing to and able to look not only at their own silo or their own department, but understand the greater good. And so I appreciate everyone's efforts in getting us to this point. And it's just a privilege to work with this group, and hopefully we can close out the FY '24 budget process here in the next few weeks.
You guys have any questions for Brian or parting comments for staff?
Thank you for all your work.
Thanks for being here tonight, too.
You guys are amazing.
Appreciate it.
We know you have to go back to your staffs and listen to why didn't we? And how come that? And why didn't we get this? That's the fallout that nobody sees. But hopefully this upfront acknowledgement of City Council that comes from our constituents in this city understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, and the fantastic leadership team that this is, and the way that you guys work together to bring this budget to be. So thank you.
Well said.
You can blame us.
Anything else, Ryan? then I think we've seen a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.